advising clients across the country. Here he is, your host, J. Christopher Boyd.
Welcome. This is Something More with Chris Boyd. I'm Chris Boyd, certified financial planner practitioner. In my office is Asset Management Resources. We're a registered investment advisor. And our show is Something More because we like to talk about not only those important dollar and cents issues, but also the quality of life issues that make the money matters matter. Thanks for being with us. I've got with me Jeff Perry, my co-host, going on another episode here, Jeff.
Here we are.
And this time we've got a little crowd joining us. It's not just the Jeff confusion, but now we've got Scott joining us too. So Jeff Tamaning and Scott Birmingham, both are advisors with our firm. Thanks, guys, for being here.
Sure.
Happy to be here.
All right. So I know we're going to talk a little bit about divorce-related issues in a few minutes. You both are advisors who are not only CFPs, but you have additional credentials. Among them is the CDFA, which is what? Chartered Divorce Financial Analyst? What's CDFA stand for again?
Certified Divorce Financial Analyst.
Analyst. Okay. So that gives you certain insights when people are dealing with issues facing divorce. So we're going to have some expertise in dealing with some of the challenges of divorce. And I thought what we might do is a series of topics of coming to this issue. And we can go through it in stages, but maybe to start us off, if we have a listener who may be at a point in their marriage where they feel as though things aren't working, and they're maybe maybe doing all things to try to see if they can make it work with therapy and the like, but they have concerns that maybe they're headed toward divorce. Where should we begin in thinking about what are the kind of things from a financial perspective? How does one prepare? What does one need to do or think about? I don't know which of you wants to start us in this. Hopefully you guys have given a little thought to who should go first. But
No, but I'll start.
Okay. Scott Birmingham.
Sure. From a broad perspective, I'll start big. Getting organized. Whether you think it's going to be a contentious divorce or not. There's usually one spouse who knows a bit more about the financials than the other. So if you're the spouse that maybe has less knowledge, starting to get organized as far as financial statements. Run into this all the time where people don't have access to tax returns. I've never seen their husband's or wife's 401k. So as much information as you start gathering up and history on it is really the first place to start. And that can, for some folks, that can be kind of daunting, especially just where do I go for it?
Yeah. So it's somewhat challenging to kind of, if you're not the person who's knowledgeable, that is to say the person who's like paying attention to all these details, it's kind of overwhelming. It's outside your comfort zone to begin with. Very common that in marriages we kind of split up who does what. I handle this, you handle that. So if this isn't your area, how do you even know what to look for? Is there a checklist of sorts that one should look for?
I have a checklist. It's kind of similar to what we give someone who's walking in the door for a financial plan, but maybe a little longer time span. So it would be things around 3 years worth of tax returns, 3 months worth of investment statements. Usually someone comes on the door to us, we just want to see the last investment statement.
Yeah, we're just looking at what's current. But
right.
That's a good point. Because in this scenario, you have to think about, is someone, perhaps, are there shenanigans involved? Is someone actually giving you what the current information is, or have they been hiding some things, perhaps in anticipation of some of these issues? So you want to look back a little bit.
Right. As balances change dramatically, as money moving, as someone started spending a lot, someone went out and bought new golf clubs and new car with an impending divorce. So 3 months worth of investment statements, bank statements, checking, savings.
Right, so let's step back for a second on these statements. Uh, First off, not all accounts are held jointly.
Right.
So if it's something that's in a joint account or in my own name, I can figure out how to get those statements. How do I access the statements that are? You mentioned my spouse's retirement account, or bank accounts may not be in joint name. Does one have a right to that information, or is it something where they just have to be at the whim of what's being willing to be shared?
So if you don't have access, it's not laying around, and your spouse is not willing to share, then as divorce starts to unfold, then you may have to have your attorney contact the other attorney and essentially petition for that information.
You have to wait for the legal process.
Yeah. So
In most of the
so the-
cases that I've dealt with, when I will get a referral from a family law or divorce attorney, and there will be here in Massachusetts a financial statements prepared by opposing counsel that shows what supposedly is all of their assets. And for the most part, we as advisors kind of have to just deal with what we're given. But we also try to find a little bit of history around the why of the split. And as you were talking about earlier, Chris, if there are why there might be hidden assets, and then you also can have a discussion with the counsel and the client around, if they think there are other assets out there, other forms of income that might not show up on the tax returns and the prepared balance sheet. Do you want to, let's say, employ like a forensic accountant to go out and do some research to see, oh yeah, the husband set up an LLC out of state for this particular business or this particular property that was purchased. So you kind of have to find out a little bit about, was it contentious? Is there potential for hiding of assets? But that occasionally comes into play.
Yeah, I've run into instances where, whether you can prove it or not, but someone who has been extraordinary career in terms of their potential for income and seemingly high pay suddenly can't work. They've got no income now, and their assets gone. Just used to have a lot of money, a lot of wealth, but gosh, and you wonder where that cash is stashed, or how much crypto that they have somewhere that's out of sight. You know what I mean? But it's hard to prove, and unless you're willing to employ someone with the specific skills. Now, in most cases, well, I don't know if it's most cases, but often, divorce comes about, and it may very, very well be the case that not everyone wants the divorce. One spouse may be resigned to have to get a divorce, but really would rather not. And I think sometimes they deny themselves the opportunity to be tuned into doing some of these preparations, and in the process, they may be more at risk of being taken advantage of in the process. When it comes to this divorce process, you guys see this where some divorces end somewhat amicably, and in a process that is much more collaborative. And in other cases, there's contentious, litigated, expensive divorce process. Jeff, maybe you can kind of start by telling us a little bit about what are the kind of the range of approaches that you can see when people go through a divorce scenario, from the most litigious to the most collaborative.
I haven't dealt with anything that was overly litigious. And here in Massachusetts, I mean, a lot of guidelines are already set as far as, you know, recommended.
I've seen litigious because people just at that point, hate and love seem to be kind of not a far distance in some cases, where they're just so mad at the other person they want it to be, as
Mhm.
resist everything, that kind of, where it's every little thing is under the skin, and you follow me, where it's just
Oh yeah,
like,
I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It's just I think often when it comes to the legal and financial stuff, it's like, all right, she makes X amount, she has X number of assets. This is what his budget is. This is what her budget is, and it's kind of like, well, these are the guidelines, and the guidelines are the
now what the
guidelines.
court's going to say, here's what the outcome is pretty straightforward, you're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so. I think. Go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, yeah. So logic says that the courts are going to say this, and the judge is going to rule this, but some people just want to fight every step of the way.
Yeah.
I've seen a husband say, "I'm going to take the kids so that I don't have to pay child support," even though he works full time and the wife stays at home with the children. So just obviously that's really not going to go through the court system that way. But people fight all sorts of things. I've seen people fight about paying money for their special needs child. I mean, it's just, yeah. So again, once it comes down to judgment day, you're going to have to spend a lot of money with attorneys going back and forth. But there's going to be a logical, conclusion to this. If you make X amount of money, you should be supporting your kids. It's affordable. You're not going to get out of these things if you can afford to. So
we've talked about this in the past, but the rules on this, or the guidance on this, has kind of been updated in recent years, hasn't it?
On support?
Yeah, when it comes to how this all was going to work, when it comes to support, how long.
Things like child support are written in. There's, different states. Tennessee's got different rules from Massachusetts, but there's no getting around the child support numbers. Usually, if you make a certain amount of money, you're going to be paying. As far as alimony, that's based on how long you're married, how much you make, your ability to pay, your health, things like that. So that there's all sorts of fluctuations there.
Chris,
and the tax issues have been updated not too long ago,
Sure.
right? When it comes to how you'd handle the tax treatment of some of these
So
issues.
alimony and child support are not taxable to the person receiving, nor are they tax deductible to the person paying. So alimony used to be deductible to the person paying and received his income. So that was a big change, which means you kind of have to rethink, what are you actually paying out? So I don't think a lot of states have a formula for that. I don't think Massachusetts has yet come up with a formula for how they make that change from taxable to non-taxable.
Jeff Perry, I think I interrupted you.
No, I was going to say there have been some legal challenges and changes to issues such as lifetime alimony. So I think that's what you may be thinking of.
Yeah.
For the advisors who specialize in this, I would suspect that one of the biggest, since one of our biggest assets other than real estate is our retirement accounts, one of the biggest decisions or settlements or judgments made in these divorce settings have to do with someone's pension or their retirement savings, and the orders that come, the QDROs that come out of the courts is probably something that defines the quality of life that the partners have following the divorce.
Very true.
Much so. Yeah,
Very true.
I agree.
I think beyond that, I think the biggest argument piece is the house. Can I afford to keep the house? And then today, with the interest rates the way they are, if you're buying out your partner, now you're going from maybe a 3% mortgage to maybe a 7% mortgage to keep your home and buy your partner. And those numbers kind of really throw off your cash flow and your ability to retire and things like that. So it's really daunting for the house.
And it's an emotional decision for people.
Right.
They might want to keep the house, and they may you can make a logical argument, I would think, for the benefit of the kids if you're the custodial
Sure.
parent, but sometimes the math doesn't line up with that, I would suspect.
And it's important to remember too that assets aren't always equivalent. a house with a debt on it that says it's one asset, one value, a retirement account that's got tax associated with it,
Good point.
capital gains versus income tax for, one asset versus another. And it can get a little more convoluted in terms of what's equivalent in as you kind of look at different assets and that house may have a stated value, but it needs a ton of work or whatever. And do you have the resources to deal with some of that? Is it a good idea? Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the house is the biggest discussion piece for 90% of the people that reach out. Do I buy out my spouse's share? Do I sell my share to my spouse? Do we sell the house together and split the proceeds? Which again, there's emotional, decisions there, but
Do I liquidate
help.
investments to go to be able to buy out the spouse? I mean, there's again, then you have the tax issue there, and then you're illiquid. You don't have assets, so it does come up. Scott and I work on these cases together, and that usually comes up. In some ways, it ends up being easy in the end. Being, yeah, you can't afford it. It's
Yeah,
just
right.
okay. You can try to do it, but you're going to be at 6.5% versus the 3% now because you need to be able to, qualify for the mortgage on your own
There's that
income.
too, right? Yeah. This does
But
really highlight the need or the suggestion of, as you're talking to your lawyer about the legal issues and the divorce law and the child custody, you should also be talking with an advisor and how it, developing a financial plan, not just a legal plan, right?
Yeah, that's kind of, I think, probably why both Jeff and I got into this. We went through divorces, and I saw there was nothing helping on the other side. Here's a spreadsheet. Here's how we divide it. But should I be taking that?
Right.
I constantly run into the good mom syndrome when the mother has children. I want to stay in the house till the kids graduate high school. And yeah, I mean, you feel for them, but if you run the numbers, you maybe should not do that. You're putting yourself in a hole. You're limiting your ability to retire at a certain time frame. So, but none of that is discussed when you go through divorce.
Right.
Or a mediator, because that's not their role.
Yeah, I wanted you to give the range of possibilities earlier. This is where I was going with it: litigation, mediation, collaborative law. There's a range of possible methods of trying to get through this process. Some more contentious than others, and it may be that you start on one path and end up on another. But that was where I was going with that question. And either of you want to elaborate a little bit on the kind of the range of possibilities?
Sure. So mediation is the least contentious, where you sit down with a mediator who may or may not have a legal background, and you essentially hash it out with that, across the table. And you're getting guidance on, what you can and cannot do, but you essentially leave the legal piece out of it, where the attorneys are fighting back and forth. You're paying money, so you can do that. That's fantastic. Sometimes people will get attorneys when you have a mediator anyways, just to kind of check it at the end. Did he miss anything? Am I getting a deal?
Make sure you're not missing something. Your interests are being watched out for. Yeah.
You mentioned collaborative divorce, which usually involves everybody having their own attorney, possibly their own financial person, possibly even like a divorce coach, kind of therapist involved in the whole process. That is usually for very, very wealthy people, because it's you're paying for multiple professionals to all gather for every meeting, and again, great, but it is
More costly.
More costly. And I've never seen anybody go through arbitration, where essentially you leave it up to the court. You can't decide, you can't agree, and a judge can decide everything for that. But I've never seen that.
And of course, the most costly probably is litigation, where you have to go through the whole court process and the back and forth and back and forth. And every time you talk to your lawyer, cha-ching, that keeps adding up.
Actually going to court, so it's usually settled before court. I think it's something
Right.
small, Jeff, like maybe $5 actually.
Yeah, it's definitely less than 10.
Yeah, small number.
One thing I would say to our listeners is, when you vet your family law or divorce attorney, do so with some caution. There are some who will do it, but it's not what they focus on. And even those who focus on it don't always know the financial ramifications. I know Scott and I have worked on cases together where we had one case where one of the attorneys put down like $40,000 as an asset in a retirement account, but it was actually $40,000 of pension payment that would have been due like 10 years from now for life. So 40,000 versus 400 or 500,000, that there's a big difference there. It's not like the attorney did it on purpose. It's just that the attorney didn't know. So sometimes we catch things like that, and we're like, you know what? That's not just 40,000 you're splitting there. You're splitting $500,000 or more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it sounds like there's a lot to consider when it comes to these issues, and the earlier you can get a little bit of guidance in the process, probably to your benefit. If you need a little bit of help, you can certainly speak to Jeff and Scott on our team at Asset Management Resources. You can reach us at amrfinancial.com or toll free 866-771-8901. Guys, thanks so much for the insights. We'll look to have you back and talk about other parts of the process and clue our listeners in on some of these other challenges should they be facing some of these kinds of issues along the way. Until next time, keep striving for something more.
You're listening to Something More with Chris Boyd, Financial Talk Show.
Asset Management Resources, LLC, and J. Christopher Boyd, CFP, provide investment advice on an individual basis to clients only. Proper advice depends on a complete analysis of all facts and circumstances. The information given on this program is in the nature of general financial comments and cannot be relied upon as pertaining to your specific situation. AMR, LLC cannot guarantee that using the information from this show will generate profits or ensure freedom from loss. Listeners should consult their own financial advisors or conduct their own due diligence before making any financial decisions.